Welcome to the Reinventing the White Coat podcast, where we delve into conversations aimed at helping you foster a healthy relationship with your career and yourself. If you're a physician feeling unfulfilled or burned out, or want to prevent yourself from going down that path, then this podcast is for you. I'm your host, Jennifer Scher, pediatrician, chief wellness officer, and executive and life coach. Sit back and relax as we explore ways to live your best life and have a career in medicine. Today, I'm really excited to have with me Dr. Bradley Block. Brad is a full-time practicing ENT, right actually in my neck of the woods, and also the host of the Physician's Guide to Doctoring podcast. So, Brad, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Right. Well, let me ask you first, as I usually start, to have you tell me a little bit about yourself, how you got to medicine and ENT in particular.
Well, grew up on Long Island, not far from where we both live now. Little closer in Nassau County instead of Suffolk County.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I really didn't have much direction in high school. It was just, work. And then when I figured I had this arrival fallacy, right? That we all have, that when I get to college, if I make it into like the best college I can, then everything will just fall into place. And so I got to college and had no direction whatsoever until I studied abroad in Jerusalem of all places. And that city is just amazing. And it made me realize just, I need to do something with a little importance and gravitas. I was good at science and one of my friends was applying to medical school. So I was like, okay, I'm a junior in college. It's a little late to be making this decision, but I've got most of the prereqs done. So I'll apply to medical school. And I did. And I got in off the wait list, one school, but I made it.
That's all you need. That's all you
Yeah.
need.
And interestingly, I still remember my parents saying, if you're a doctor, you're going to need to talk to people, right? Because not really my forte. It might come across differently on the podcast because I kind of take my personality and dial it up to 11. But, it took me until my 30s really to realize that I had social anxiety. I had trouble talking to people. I did.
Huh.
They noticed it. They didn't name it. But that's what was going on. So, and that's where kind of the podcast comes from, is trying to navigate that interaction with patients. Now we cover a lot more than that, but the main driver for me to start the podcast was to try and improve my skills at that doctor-patient interaction, because I'm an outpatient physician like you. I see 25, 30 patients a day. And so that's hard. It's hard. So
Yeah. So that's interesting. I just recently had somebody on the podcast who was talking about what it's like to be an introvert versus an extrovert, and how draining it is for introverts to be on like that, like you're
yeah.
describing, all
Oh,
day.
that's not me. We've discovered my wife is a socially adept introvert. So she's really good at being around people, but she really doesn't want to be. And I am a extrovert with social anxiety. I'm always the one that's pushing to make plans with other people. But when I get there, I don't know what to do with myself.
Yes, I love that. This conversation, that's exactly what we were talking about, how different they can look the same on the outside, right? But it's such different pathology. Not that it's
Yeah.
pathology.
Yes.
Although if you
No,
grew up today, you would have been medicated for sure.
definitely. Yes.
All right. Well, ENT is lucky that it found you. Do you enjoy your days in the OR better than your days in the office because of that?
Yes. Yeah. And also, I think because it's more, the OR is controlled. The OR is controlled. Like, you do one case and then you do your next case and then you do your next case.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, sometimes unpredictable things happen. And that can certainly be stressful. But, you have your undivided attention on this one thing. Whereas, ideally in the office, you have your undivided attention on your patient and then your next, and then, but it's so much more rapid fire going through each patient, and you're charting and so there's so much that goes into each individual patient visit. Um, it's yeah, definitely outpatient is more exhausting than being in the OR. That being said, the stuff that I deal with in the OR is definitely lower acuity than other, I'm not doing transplant, I'm not doing cardiothoracic surgery, I'm not doing I'm not doing head and neck cancer. I don't do, it's not part of my practice. We've got some great tertiary care places
Yeah.
around us that's their bread and butter. So I send that stuff out. So anything that I'm not doing a ton of, I send out to someone who is doing a ton of it. So like it's also, different acuity stuff that I take care of in the
Right.
operating room.
But it's a big deal for me. What it's routine to you, but give me a pair of tonsils to take out and I'm not.
Once you get a couple under your belt, it's just momentum just carries you.
All right. So tell me, and the reason why I wanted to talk to you and bring you on is to talk to some about some of the conversations you have on your podcast, which I think would really be helpful for our listeners. But I'm listening to you and I'm sort of struck by the fact that you were even able to find time to start a podcast with how busy you are. So how? Why? What in the world?
So, my day is this. I wake up, um, f- you know, finally I wake up before my kids. That just happened like a week ago. Like I wake up before them. But it used to be they wake me up, I hang out with them, and because sleeping through the night has been a problem, my wife then, once I leave for work, that's when she wakes up. So I give her like a little bit of time, a little bit of extra sleep, and then and then I go to work. I see my patients, you know, callbacks through lunch and all that, and then at the end of my day, drive home. Then it's family time, right? Finishing any homework, activities, dinner, bedtime, and then down to the basement for podcasting. So, but I don't podcast every single day. But the other days I do have other stuff, right? Like recording this in April, I had to like sort out all my tax information, all that stuff. But so like the time is there. It just anytime you're saying yes to something, you're saying no to something else. So what am I saying no to? I'm saying no to like downtime with my wife, which isn't great, but I'm not podcasting 7 days a week. So, the other, you know, 5 or 6 days we are together. We are spending time together. So
Yeah.
it does it, there is the time if it's important to you. And actually I started podcasting after my second son was born because instead of taking like a paternity leave, I took like a week, but then I worked 4 days a week for a couple of months so that it was kind of like, just one day a week where I would be able to, take some of the load. Um, but, I had two kids that were really close in age. So there was a lot of napping, there was a lot of sleeping. So that's when I started the podcast. And once you
Uh-huh.
have momentum, it does, just like with tonsils, the momentum does carry you. You keep doing it. So.
All right. So why? What do you enjoy about it? I mean, the topic is, and I'll have you explain it, but I thought in particular, you have some of these optimizations. You're trying to help doctors um, be better in their days, right? Enjoy their
Yes.
days better, be more efficient. So maybe you could give me first some examples of some success stories or some tips and things that you have and
So
shed some light.
ultimately, a lot of it comes from questions that I have. And so I stole from Ted Lasso.
Love
He
that
said
show.
about the
I'm so
the co-
sorry it's over.
yeah, it was like a breath of fresh air. Just made you want to be better. I love shows like that make you
Yeah.
want to be better. I can't watch shows where you're watching like a villain because it can't emulate. I want someone I can look up to. And so what he would say is your job as a coach is to help these boys be the best version of themselves.
Yeah.
And that's what I want the podcast to be. I want it to help doctors be the best version of ourselves. And so a lot of it is a reflection of what's going on in my life. And so I was unfortunately involved in litigation. And so I had a lot of episodes about litigation, a while ago. And then I had a couple episodes on parenting because I wanted to be the best parent I could, but always from the lens of the physician, right? And so, physicians are high earners. So if you're a high earner, how do you make sure your kids don't end up spoiled? Or if you're a high achiever, how do you make sure you're not projecting your own values onto your kids? You don't want them to just be a little version of you. You don't want to put this undue pressure on them. So, a lot of it is just an extension of the questions that I happen to have. And so those are some examples. I was trying to build a medical expert witness practice. So I had a couple of episodes about building a medical expert witness practice. If anyone has any cases for me, that'd be great. But that that didn't really take off. So so now moving in other directions, and a lot of it stems from and the origin of the podcast was seeing some of my partners being able to navigate their day, seeing like 5 patients an hour and end on time and go home. Of course, I didn't see behind the curtain in that, a lot of them were actually finishing their charts at home. And so it wasn't as smooth as it seemed to me at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But it gave me the drive to say, how do I engage with my patients better and more efficiently? So like we have all this stuff that we learned in medical school about how we can be better listeners and pay more attention to our patients and really, be a better doctor for them. Um, but I felt like there wasn't this eye on efficiency,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's always like you can always give more to your patient. Well, yes, but then you're not respecting the patient who's at home having trouble getting an appointment because you don't have that many appointments in the day. Or the patient's been waiting an hour and a half in the waiting room because you spent so much time with this other patient. So how do we respect all 3 patients at the same time? How do we have these interactions efficiently? And so, that's what a lot of them, I'll have a difficult patient for one reason or another. I had trouble and the thing is they're not difficult, right? It's I am not as good at the interaction as I could have been. So what do I need to learn now? And then I'll find that expert and I'll have them on the show.
All right. So I know I'm actually not myself, but I bring my mother to, I don't need an ENT, thankfully. There's one doctor I don't need, but I bring my mom to a doctor at ENT and
Oh,
allergy,
one of my
and a
partners.
lot of our patients go to ENT and allergy. You guys seem to have a well-oiled machine
We do.
over
We do.
there.
We do. I'm really proud of my practice. It's the practice that I joined out of residency. So I've been there the whole time, but it's a practice that I've always been super proud to be a part of. Yes, thank you.
Yeah. So how is it? And does that reflect on um the fulfillment and well-being of your doctors? Do you have NPs or PAs, or is it all doctors?
It's mostly doctors. We've had, what's happened, our model has always been physician,
Mm-hmm.
physician, 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 but sometimes we'll have a bigger group join us and they'll come with their advanced practice providers and
Mm-hmm.
we'll have to figure out a way to integrate them into the practice because we're not going to just be like, and fire 15 people, like we're going to find a place for them to practice and sometimes they stay with us and sometimes they don't, but that's not something that we um, and have actively recruited for in the past. um, but yes, it's something that really works well with physician wellness because we're run by physicians. We have like our structure is a little different from yours at Allied in that we have a C-suite and we have a physician board. And the physician board really makes the big decisions. And there's a monthly meeting where a lot of things are discussed. And so, everything big that happens with the permission of the physician board. And then the C-suite really manages everything. And one of the advantages of being is, we're 250 physicians. We're huge. And that's really put us in a great position for economies of scale because now we can hire some super sophisticated people to help us with all aspects of the practice. And if there's something that's going wrong, we're going to hire the best person we can afford, and because there's so many we can afford, so it really helps us manage the practice more effectively and efficiently. And also we're really iterative about things. Like we've got committees. We've got committees coming out the kazoo. And it's a way to keep the physicians involved and engaged because they take ownership and they feel like if they're like, listen, there's a problem with, the audiology department. We're like, great, join the audiology committee, help us do it better.
Yeah.
And sometimes they're like, no, I just want to sit here and complain. But a lot of times, it's like, oh, you know what? We didn't realize that was happening. Thanks for letting us know. we're going to work on that, right? And it helps us continuing to evolve the practice because there is sometimes a sense that like the way that you would ideally have the practice run is not how it runs because there's so many of us and so many voices. But at the same time, like we're partners. We're partners. So we listen to each other, we respect each other's opinions, and we don't always do what the other one says, but we'll listen and see if there's a reasonable way to integrate that idea and make it happen.
So you have 250 partners or 250 doctors?
250 doctors, but more than half of whom are
Mm-hmm.
full equity partners. And we did something really interesting recently. We got rid of our restrictive covenant.
So people are only
Be-
there if they want to be there.
exactly. And that's because we don't have attrition. I mean, we do. It happens. It
Yeah.
sometimes happens, but it happens so infrequently. In fact, sometimes we have attrition and then that person comes back,
Yeah.
right? So, so, um, so we got rid of it because it's, we don't, we don't want to treat other physicians that way.
Mm-hmm.
And we just don't need it because, you know, people want to be here. They want to be here. Why? Because you're the person who's making the decisions that affect your life are seeing patients every day just like you.
Yeah. How does that trickle down to your staff? What's the turnover rate of your staff?
That's something we're working on. That's something we're working on. Actually, we just hired I don't remember his title, but he came from L'Oreal of all places.
Uh-huh.
And he is the head of director of employee engagement,
Mm-hmm.
right? So he's there to make sure that their voices are being heard and they enjoy being here and they want to continue working and they would, recommend the place to their friends. So it's something that I around the time of the Great Resignation, actually, I had recommended to my practice that we have a patient experience committee. But ultimately, the role of the patient experience committee was to help retain staff. So patient experience and staff experience are inextricably linked. For
Right.
those who aren't watching on video, I just linked my fingers together.
Yeah.
So are they inextricably linked? I tried to do that around the microphone and it was a little awkward. Um, and so the better your patient, the better your staff experience is, the better your patient experience is going to be. And so that's what the committee was working on, finding different ways to engage in different areas of the practice, different staff members, different departments to
Mm-hmm.
try and get their voices heard. What can we do better? Right. And then we hired a new CEO who then hired this head of employee engagement. And now he's like, the committee ultimately, had to pivot and do something else because this is now his full-time job. So, the answer is we're working on it. It's in the industry, there's just so much turnover.
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes we just get into the thought of this, as you talk about, learned helplessness.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's nothing you can do about it. It's the nature of the beast. It's going to happen. So we're just going to roll with it. Or what we're doing now is, well, what can we do to do better? And I love that about the leadership of my practice. And again, I'm proud. I'm drinking the Kool-Aid. I'm
Mm-hmm.
drinking the Kool-Aid. I
Um,
am proud to be there.
I'm so
Clearly.
glad. This is amazing. But when you think about the staff, that also people leave for so many different reasons. And I always talk about um, the ones there's good leaving sometimes. You have these
Yes.
young people, they want to go other places, they get better, bigger, better, they go to become
Yeah.
nurses, they go to become other things. There's always going to be
Right. There's
turnover.
always attrition. However, in our industry, there's someone across the street who's looking for MAs. There's someone down the block who's looking for a front
Mm-hmm.
desk person. And sometimes if they're just paying a couple cents more, it's like,
Yes.
okay, I'm leaving. I'm going
Yeah.
there. Right? Because that over the course of the year is going to make a difference in my life. And you know what? These people are not so nice anyway. So, you know, yes, there are always going to be people who
Mm-hmm.
leave, but the rate of attrition in our field, I mean, I can't quote any numbers, but it's high.
Yeah.
Everyone who works in healthcare knows that, the staff turnover is really high. And so anything that you can do for staff retention, and then, that's infectious. They get to know each other. They get to care about each other. They get
Hmm.
to, and so actually something that I'm planning on doing this, I tried to do it and inclement weather prevented it from happening. I'm planning on having my office over to my house with their families, like when in the warmer weather to hang out. See, I always
Yeah.
assumed they wouldn't want to do that, right? Dr. Block, I see enough of you at work. I don't need to see you
Yeah.
out of work. I don't. But as it turns out, right? They were like, that's a great idea. We'd love to do that. So we're going to do that. We're going to get a food truck in the driveway. They're going to hang out in the backyard with their family. The kids are going to play together. It's going to be great. And so stuff like that to build, after you have an experience like that, you get to know someone in their like
Yeah.
full dimensions as a
Hmm.
person. They're going to be much less likely to leave unless, as you said, onto bigger and better things. And then
Right.
you're happy for them. You're happy they're leaving because you want good things for that person.
Yeah. So you guys don't get rotated to different offices. You sort of stay in your home.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, we that's something that we do differently that I think is a strength, right? My patients always know where to find me. So instead of me going to different neighborhoods on Long Island and having four different offices and each place is different, and sometimes I interviewed with a place in Miami when I was finishing residency, and um, like in the middle of the day, I'd have to drive from one office to the other. Like I'd be so stressed. Like if I'm running
Yeah.
behind and now I'm like scarfing down my food in the car. I mean, we do that anyway because we're
Uh,
scarfing down food between calling back patients. But and I got to be stressed out about running behind because I got to drive to another office. That's like preposterous. But my office, yeah, they know where to find me. My patients know where to find me because I'm always in the same office.
yeah. Do you have ENT colleagues who are working in hospitals and other sorts of settings? Is it that have vastly different experiences than you do in your home location?
Yeah, I mean it. You mean in ENT and allergy? You're
No, or
asking?
just ENTs just sort of in
Oh,
different settings, right? Like, is what you have something special, or is it,
is it is
do
it
you know
is
what
it
I mean? Like,
commonplace?
is it just
Yeah.
because ENT is like this, or is it because you have a special group?
Well, I think it's a combination of things, right? I think it's a combination of one, yes, we have a special group. We have this leadership who started the practice, and actually, a lot of them have retired by now, and they're not part of the practice anymore, right? Um, they had the foresight to create this group, and it was originally three offices. I think maybe it was like 15 doctors, which at the time would have been a huge practice, right? And it's just over the course of 25 years, it's just slowly grown and grown and grown into this beast. And it's we they're the only other practices that I can think of that are anywhere remotely close to us that are ENT practices in terms of size are were put together by private equity.
Hmm.
So they're not physician owned practices,
Yeah.
right? So maybe there's some ownership because you retain some ownership, whatever the deal was, but these other they're not like us. We're wholly owned. But my friends that work in other cities as ENTs, it's I think ENT is moving to more of an outpatient practice, but the other thing that we have in New York is we have all of these tertiary care hospitals at our disposal. And
Hmm.
so, I don't do head and neck cancer anymore. Whereas a lot of my colleagues that I trained with are still doing it. I mean, why would I dabble in it when I have, these big tertiary care centers at my doorstep and I can quickly and easily send my my patients to someone who's fellowship trained, and that would be the third composite resection with radial forearm free flap that they did that week,
Right.
right? So some of my colleagues still they do that, and I think it's part of it's just the New York metropolitan area that we have just
Yeah.
such a high density of these academic centers.
Yeah. So, Brad, I love how you take whatever's going on in your life and then you turn it into a topic of research.
It's kind of yeah, it's one of my strengths and one of my weaknesses because my brother and my wife will tease me about the fact that I kind of dive into everything headlong and that including that, yes.
Yeah, and you seem to have quite a passion for even your day job and somewhat of a leadership, role there, it sounds like.
Yeah, I mean, I've kind of dabbled in some leadership roles. We have that physician board that I thought very briefly about running for, and then
Hmm.
decided against it because my kids are too small, and I
Yeah.
just don't have the time to devote for it. For maybe in like a decade or something, if things are still going
Yeah, but
well, then
but
then I'd consider that.
everybody whether you have an official title as a leader or an unofficial title as a leader, you're by being a doctor, I mean, you are creating a culture at your office. You're welcoming everybody to your home. You're, certainly making um, an environment that's making it a nice place for people to work.
I try. I try. It's really important to me. It's really important to me, especially after I realized after doing some of my episodes how important it was. It's like Dale Carnegie, how to win friends
Hmm.
and influence people. There's all
Yeah.
this stuff that's like obvious and intuitive, but we don't do it. Like
Mhm.
everyone loves the sound of their own name. So whenever you're talking to someone, Jen, you should say their name, Jen, so that they, because they just love hearing it. Um, but we never do it,
Right.
right? And he's got all of these great ideas that we never, and it's the same thing. Like I didn't realize that, oh, wait a second, when I walk in, I should be stopping at the front desk and saying hi to my staff. And on my way out, I should be, making a lap every so often and just checking in on people.
Hmm.
Of course you should be doing that. But if someone doesn't expressly tell you, then it doesn't come to mind. So I think a lot of the leadership came from lessons that I learned in the podcast. And it,
Hmm.
it can be infectious. Like I tried to have this thing at my house, didn't work out. Then in the winter, one of the other doctors opened up his home and we had something at his house. So, that kind of culture that you know, it spreads. Like, you can drag people down and that's infectious, or you can bring them up.
Absolutely. Yeah. So do you have maybe one or two specific tips about ways that people who are working as doctors, whatever specialty they're in, and maybe not leaders or fully empowered, but one or two tips that they might have to make their day to day more efficient, a little bit more optimized, something to some tips and tricks.
Um, so it's because I am specifically an outpatient doctor. It's kind of hard for me to put myself, I'm so far from residency now. It was almost 13 years ago that I finished residency. So, it's hard for me to put myself in the shoes of those people. But, I think the more that you can do in the quiet hours when you're under um, no stress, but still kind of a time crunch. Meaning, like, if you want to get to bed tonight, if there's something that you can do in your charts for the following day to make the next day easier and flow smoother, do it the night before because you want to get to sleep. Um, or, the morning you wake up just a little earlier and, you got to leave to make it on time in 15 minutes. So now you got 15 minutes to like, work on those charts, review those patients that you're about to round on something. Because once you get there, there's, I think it's Parkinson's law, which is the bureaucracy tends to fill the space that it's given. And
Mm.
so we tend to do that ourselves. I did a couple episodes on charting and how to chart more efficiently. And the common theme was just do it. Do your charts. Like you finish seeing that patient, and I definitely don't do this every time, but I definitely do it a lot better after having learned this, is close out that patient's chart. Finish it. Because if you do it now, it's fresh in your mind and you've got you've got someone breathing down your neck in the next room that you need to be able to finish that chart because you got to start seeing them. They're waiting for you. In fact, sometimes the door is open and they're looking at my butt and
Hmm.
they're watching me type. So I better not mess around. I better do that chart so I can turn around and start seeing them, right? Whereas if I put that chart off to the end of the day, now I'm sitting down in my office, I'm checking Instagram, I'm like meandering, right? I'm not so much of maybe I'll click a couple things. Then you know what? I see that little the the little clock that's ticking that tells me that, it's going to take a couple seconds for the screen to refresh. So maybe I'll pick up my phone. Well, so then it all that expands. And now that chart that would have taken you a minute to do is taking you 5 minutes to do.
Yeah.
And because you put off so many charts, you've got 8 charts to do. Now it's taking you 40 minutes to do, and even longer because you're going to take a couple breaks in there. You got to use the bathroom. You got to get yourself a snack. You worked hard. Get yourself a snack, right? But if you have that patient looking at you, you're going to do that chart in a minute, and then you're able to close their chart mentally too. And then, and something I like to say is before you see that next patient, take a sip of water, take a deep breath, close out all your mental browser windows so nothing's on your mind, and give that patient the attention they deserve.
So how do you do? I mean, I love that advice. I struggle with that advice. It's my goal, but when they're waiting and as you said, staring up your ass, whatever it was
Yeah.
that you said, how do you not just zoom to the next room? How do you
I
you just
you got to set a boundary.
yeah.
A lot of having a healthy practice and well-being and mental well-being is boundary setting.
Mhm.
It's something that we were trained not to do. If you don't give everything of yourself, then you're not a good doctor. You don't care about, listen, you signed up to be a doctor. They didn't sign you up. You signed yourself up. And so
Mhm.
you have to give everything of yourself to, no, no, no. Set some boundaries. And this boundary is when I'm done seeing my patients for the day, I'm going home. I'm not working on charts. So for the extra minute, you know what? I'll do a couple extra squats in the gym. So the butt you're looking at is a pretty good butt, but you're going to be looking at my butt for a little while I finish this chart. And that's okay. That's okay. Because you can also even explain it to the patient. You turn around, you say, I just want to finish this note so that I can give you my undivided attention.
Yeah, that's
And then you
great.
turn back around and now they understand why they're
Right.
looking at that butt.
That
You know,
is, I'm going to practice that. Now that's going to be my task for the next week.
put on a sticky note. Put on a sticky note so you don't forget it. Like anytime I try to integrate something new like that into my practice,
Yeah.
I always I try to put on a sticky note so I don't forget because it's very
Yeah.
easy to be like, yeah, I'll do that, and then you're like, what was that thing I wanted to do?
Yeah. And maybe try only one thing at a time.
Yes,
That's a great
yeah.
take home. That will be what everybody listening, let's try to finish our charts
It's
before,
yeah,
right?
it's important.
Um,
It's important.
okay. So this was great, Brad. Please just tell everybody how they can reach you or hear your podcast before we sign off.
So I'm available on all podcast players. Just look up either Bradley Block or Physician's Guide to Doctoring. I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Physician's Guide. I just started a Facebook group for my um, for my podcast called Physician's Guide to Doctoring Facebook group. So, for people to like, if you have questions, you're like, I'm having this issue in my practice. What does everybody think? And I'll be like, I don't have an answer, but let me get an expert on the podcast and then we can talk about it. We'll do an episode on it, so it'll be a great way to create new ideas and help us just all live, right? Be the best versions of ourselves. So that's what we're trying to get out there. I know that's what you're doing. That's
Mhm.
why you're putting yourself out there as a coach and in your practice. And so I love that we're looking out for each other. So yes, thank you.
Yes. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Okay. And thank you to the listeners for spending your precious time with us. I hope to see everybody again on the next episode of Reinventing the White Coat. That's all for this episode of Reinventing the White Coat. If you enjoyed this conversation, subscribe now so you don't miss an episode. If you're interested in coaching or in being a guest on the podcast, you can reach out to me online at sharecoaching.com. Thanks for listening, and don't be afraid to live your best life.